welcome, Anja. Thank you so much for joining us today and for traveling so far to be here. I wanted to ask you, first of all, you've enjoyed a successful international career of over 20 years in library management and library automation. So could you tell us a bit about that? And then also, what do you consider to be some highlights of your career?
Oh, wow. It's difficult to think of highlights even. Every job I've had, and there were 7 in over 25 years, so that's, for a librarian, that's a lot.
Yes.
But I've enjoyed every one of them. Mostly, many of them were too short. One of the highlights, maybe even, of what I did was in 2001. I had a sabbatical leave of 3 months, and what I did was I prepared that for 6 months, and I traveled throughout the U.S. for 2 months and 1 month in the UK. And I visited, I think, over 30 libraries, library organizations, and I went to Ann Arbor to go to JSTOR, for example. And I think I learned so much from that. That's where my international activities really started, because I also built the network. That's also how I got a job 3 years later in the US.
Great.
So that's one of the highlights, definitely. And of course, the 3 years in the US were a highlight too. We have such a global profession. We have a global network. We recognize each other's work all over the globe. And so that was why I really wanted the international experience. I thought that would help the institutions that I would work for. So that was something, and there is absolutely a line, a red thread throughout everything that I did, and I'm so thankful and that I could do all that and use my experience now in several ways.
Well, terrific. We're so glad that you're here and sharing your experiences with us now. I really enjoyed your session this morning, your plenary presentation.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
All right, I will now ask a question about a provocative paper that you delivered at the Fiesole retreat in 2015
yes.
in Berlin.
Yes.
And as a collection development librarian, I have to be somewhat alarmed
Ooh.
that you were thinking the unthinkable, the library without a collection.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this?
Well, if you start thinking about open science, and it all started with the thought about open publications. And if that comes to life, and you think of the scenario where everything that is published, let's define it, let's limit it to publications at this point. Everything's published open access. Let me ask you the question. How do you then build a collection, and why? Because your researchers will be able to access all the knowledge that is published.
Yeah.
So,
well, as an intermediary, without an intermediary role, the collection now is defined by what we're paying for.
yes.
So what you're talking about then is...
Everything's free.
Yes.
So what would then be the reason to make any kind of selection? Because that's what we do as libraries. We select, and the border of that, the limitation is the budget that we have, and of course, and then we try to serve our users best within the budget. That's usually in practice how it goes. So if everything's out open, why would you then make a selection? Maybe we will. But I wanted to point out that it's not a given that we will always do that. And maybe this scenario will not come to life, I don't know. But if we have to question how much we invest in making a selection for our users, if they can do it better themselves on the internet and tools that they can just use, we have to focus on something else, or we should acknowledge that that is not where our added value is anymore. And that was really the message that I wanted to send.
And I think at some level then, the question becomes less of selection and more of discovery.
It could be.
For the user.
Yeah.
So for the user, the question of discovery; for the library, then Are you providing discovery opportunities, or does somebody else?
Exactly, and what we're seeing, our first idea was thinking the unthinkable, a library without a catalog. Why limit your users to your own collection in their initial search?
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense anymore. And then the next thing is maybe not a collection either. So I'm not saying that we cannot play a role in helping our users in discovery, but we will have to redefine it at least.
What would be the direction you would go in? I know it's unthinkable at this point, but
Well, on a very practical level, my library still has its old-fashioned catalog, and we will turn it off next year or in 2018, and we will not buy a discovery system. So that is how we put this in practice. We direct people to the internet, the different tools, the electronic bibliographies, and it's also because of the fact that bibliographies now have links to content, and you can link out, that is also something that makes the catalog sort of obsolete. So we will point them to all these other other systems and possibilities, and just have no catalog anymore. Yeah, for internal purposes, but not for our users, not for discovery.
So you don't select any longer, but you point people to content.
Well, we do have.
As
We still
librarians.
have a collection, of course, because
course.
But as librarians, we have more the consulting role,
Yeah.
and of course we help students, to find information and so on and so on. But it's more of a consultant's role. It's not the gateway.
Yes.
It's not like go here and you will find everything you need. We will say to them, what are you looking for? Well, we will point you in a direction and we'll help you in using the tools that are appropriate for you.
So our local libraries in the future a more relevant resource than an entity that might be more like a consortium, or one entity that would be to serve many?
In terms of collection, it can only go global,
Yeah.
is what I'm thinking. Consortia, that's already there.
Yeah. Or
In regions, there's already a group catalog
Yes.
and sharing and
Yes.
so forth. So we're going to the next level. That's what I'm thinking. Interestingly enough, some things become more local, because if you think about the consultant role of librarians, you have to be close to your users. So in some ways, a consortia won't really help you. That's something that you do by yourself.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you become more local, and you want to be closer to your community. It's interesting. In the 80s, we closed many branch libraries because we thought, they're not using the physical collection anymore, so we closed them. Now, today, I would not close them anymore. I would keep them open, but have a different function as a study space or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's, in some ways, it's also going sort of back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this idea of the collection is this is a really impactful discussion right now, I think, and really timely. For one thing, I think what libraries traditionally measured our value in the sense that we had a handle on what is our collection,
Yeah.
that we could conceive of it in numbers, we could conceive of it in volumes,
Yeah.
in how many journals we subscribe to, right? It was a collection that we could really get our arms around in a way.
Yeah.
And so I think what's so difficult for people in our profession to allow is that maybe in the future that's not how this is going to look, and that the clout and renown of a library is not going to be tied to how many books you have, how many journal packages you subscribe to, and how many things you have. So that's hard to let go of. It feels like we're taking a huge risk, and it feels like we are sort of letting go of our children in a way. They're leaving the nest, and we don't have control over them anymore. So I think these are really timely. This is the time to be talking about this, because what can we then focus on? What can we refocus on? And then how do we refocus our users and how they see our value? So your discussion of libraries and our added value, it really hit home this morning in the session. And so that was going to be one of my questions, was what are these value-added services that we can now start to use in a way to rebrand ourselves, or almost sell ourselves to a user community who's already seen us as a trusted partner in a certain role. And those of us in collection development in particular, I think, are really having to rethink our value. And you started talking a bit about getting rid of discovery at the library level, which we know that our students are not going to our library catalog. I do a lot of instruction in my role at my college, and when I ask students, where do you go to start your research, they unabashedly tell me that they go to Google or Google Scholar, and I use Google every single day in my personal life as well, in my research life. Yeah, or Wikipedia. I use these things, right? So I wonder what you think about the added value now in our service of maybe helping students to navigate this world in which they aren't just looking at a collection that we have gathered from outside sources, and we're telling them, so you can trust this because it's in the library. Instead, they're seeking information in this global environment, and they no longer feel like they can trust everything. So how do you feel about our role in that piece of things?
Yeah, well, there we are, the teacher. First of all, I'd like to say that I totally agree with you on what the trend that you describe, and also how hard it is for us as professionals, but also, of course, for users. It's got two sides. The users still see us as a collection of books too. So there's a lot to work on. Because even if we sort of find a way and see what we want to do, we have to make sure that our users know and understand our added value in new areas. So there's so much to work on.
Yes.
And my library now is working on a project with a high school on information literacy.
Oh, terrific.
Because, of course, when students come to our college or university, they have already experience with searching for information and making for doing presentations in school. So we try to try and see what is it that they learn in high school, and how can we follow up so that it's a continuum, so that when they get to university, they are ready to learn the next level of how do you assess information that you find on the internet. I think, you grow up, your parents have a role, your school have, etc. So that is important, and I really think that information literacy becomes more important. It's almost like information literacy was a little bit like, we'll show you how the catalog works. Let's inform you on Boolean search. So that is gone. Or Boolean search when it's appropriate in other systems, you can teach them. And I used to think that information literacy teaching was not so important, but I think it's much more important in this global situation, in this digital environment. So we need very good teachers for the students, and we need to be consultants for the researchers. That is the big shift. We're not a gateway anymore. We are consultants and teachers. And we will have to prove our added value just by doing it.
Right.
And we don't know all the new areas. I think research data, we talked a little bit about that in the Q&A. Well, that is an area where, IT might think that that's our business because this is about storage. But it's also about a culture shift. It is about metadata. It's about how do I share data, so we have a role there, and we can just start doing it and finding out what the role exactly is. And so the new roles are not clear yet. Some of them, information literacy is maybe the easiest. We've already been doing that, and I think it will become more intense and more important.
You know,